And welcome again, everyone, to this XR World training event meeting, where we are fortunate to have Rosa and Co talking to us about establishing new groups. I'm going to say as little as possible and hand over to Rosa to introduce yourselves and tell us where we're heading. Maybe we'll do a bit of a check-in around that after that. Thank you, Rosa.
So yeah, my name's Rosa, this is Ewan and this is Gerard, and we are currently in Western Australia.
We're coming from the land of the Bibbulmun people, Whadjuk Bibbulmun people. And we always make time in our meetings to acknowledge that where we are is colonised land. So this place was invaded a couple of hundred years ago in a process that's never been rectified. There's never been a reconciliation, there's no treaty, it's really still under invasion. So the rebellion that we're a part of is been one that's been going for a couple of hundred years in this place, and we take time to reflect on that, and we do a lot of work to make sure we can kind of bridge the gap between climate and First Nations justice. And so probably a lot of other people are also on colonised lands, and so we wanted to just acknowledge that the systems and processes that led to those colonial forces launching throughout the world over the last couple of hundred years are the same ones, really, that are still colonising and still plundering a beautiful planet and leading us towards the future that we in Extinction Rebellion acknowledge the truth of and actively resist. And so I want to pay respect here, where we are, to the Whadjuk Bibbulmun people. And maybe pause for a moment if you are also on colonised lands, to reflect on that process and what it's done to people and country in your place as well. And this is Gerard.
Hello. I think Roger's here.
Yes, I think Roger's joined us, so we want to pass over to you, Roger.
Yeah, apologies all of you. I got held up, dare I say it, due to various difficulties. Yeah, I'm Roger from UK. I'm one of the co-founders. I'm here technically to host it. So are we doing a short introduction? Go round, Andre.
We can. There is 16 of us on the call at the moment, so I don't think we need to go into breakout rooms if we can keep it quite snappy. Everybody okay with that? Then I'll try and convince Zoom to let you all allow yourselves to unmute. And if every person can give us a quick check-in, where you at, both in terms of your location as well as with XR, and pass on to someone else that you see on the screen. By the time we start losing track of who has gone and who hasn't gone, if those who haven't gone yet and would like to go would just please raise their hands or move about on the screen, making it easier for the next one person to check them in. And if we could start, perhaps, who'd like to go first? Next to me on my screen is Sarah from Vancouver. I see Paul Sheeky's hand. Paul, go for it, please.
Okay. Yeah, Paul Sheeky in the North UK. I'm the internal coordinator for the North region, and I have to set up a local group soon, so it'd be good to know how to do it again because I've forgotten since last time. And I'll pass to Sarah.
Sorry, was that to me? I'm Sarah in Vancouver, Canada. I'm outreach coordinator here. I've been involved for 2 years. I will pass to Doug.
Hi, I'm Doug Swain in Moncton, New Brunswick, Canada, and I'm, I guess, an organizer with XRNB.
Anyone else like to go? You can also use your digital raising hands. Please go for it.
I'm Mildred in Edmonton, and I don't know anyone in XR here, but I'm just interested in getting going. I haven't done anything, or I'm just here to learn.
Ned, go for it.
Ned from Huddersfield in the north of the UK. I'm the UK Talks and Trainings Coordinator, but I also do integration for the north as well, which is why I'm here today. And I will pass on to Cassie.
Hi, I'm Cassie from Cape Town. I'm the Action Coordinator here, and I've been involved for about 2 years. I'll pass on to Anne.
Thanks, Cassie. I'm Anne. I'm in Scotland. I'm in various groups nationally and locally, but a local group is struggling a bit, so I'm keen to reactivate it and get some ideas for that. I will pass on to, shall we do Patrick, because he's in the chat, just so we don't forget him. Patrick?
I think Patrick just wants to stay in the chat, not on the audio visual. So that's cool, Patrick. If you want to just put it in the chat, and we won't publish the chat. It is being recorded. Who would like to go on the video next? I see Pontus and then Paul.
Yeah, my name is Pontus, located in the southern part of Sweden. I'm a full-time climate activist within Extinction Rebellion, focusing on mass mobilization right now, together with 3 other guys that are also full-time climate activists. And I pass it over to Linda. You haven't checked in, right? Or Linda?
Okay. I'm Linda. I'm from Wisconsin, USA, and I'm involved on the regenerative culture team in XR America, and I have 0 experience starting groups, so that's why I'm here. I'm not sure who to pass it to next.
We go for Paul Hendrickson from the Netherlands.
Very well pronounced. My name is Paul. I'm both nationally and locally involved in several XR groups, amongst which is outreach and training nationally. And we're kind of redirecting our strategy for recruiting new rebels. So this is the excellent opportunity for me to orientate. So who was I think Milt?
I see Julie M's hand.
Yeah, hi, thanks. Thanks for doing this. I've been through several iterations of groups, doing really, really well, going to almost nothing, and now the next step. And I think the question I have, or the challenge we're facing right now, is this idea that everybody thinks everything's sorted and that people don't need to be active now. That seems to be what we're getting. So I'm looking forward to hearing what people have to say. So who's next? Hand up, somebody. I can't see all the hands. Anybody else? Andre, can you see? Yeah, Molly. Thank you.
Please go ahead, Molly. Uma.
Hi, I'm Mali. I'm not sure I can keep the video because my connection is where in France, involved in translations and a strategy group in France, willing to create a new and quite away from what we're going to talk about here. And I pass it on to who's next? Right, Julie.
Not seeing any hands at the moment, and we need to get moving on perhaps. So last chance. Going, gone. Back to you, Roger.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, we just to go through where we're here and what's going on. I've been involved in helping people to mobilize Extinction Rebellion groups for 1.5 years to 2 years now around the world in a sort of advisory capacity, as it might say. I don't have any particular formal role. And when I helped set up XR World, the idea was to increase the connections between people in different XR mobilizations or groups around the world so we can learn from each other and learn what the best practice is. Because as I'm sure you all know, there's good things that you're good at and the things that you're not so good at. And it makes sense to learn from people that have succeeded in different areas so that we don't have to reinvent the wheel and what have you. So the purpose of these trainings, and there's going to be another one about fundraising next week, and possibly a few more, which can be told about, is not to discuss all the politics or whatever. It's about the mechanics, as it were, of how you actually get things to happen. So my apologies, I was late, and sorry, Rosa and co. I got held up, but we have gone through, we have sort of rehearsed what we are going to go through. So you know, we're all friends here, so if it's a little bit bumpy, we'll live, won't we? But the general gist is that we thought we'd have a format where I would broadly ask Rosa and Gerard and Ewan some questions. They'd respond to them for about 45 minutes, maybe a bit longer, maybe a bit shorter. And then obviously it's a chance for everyone else on the call to ask specific questions, which would help them get organised. And obviously you can contact the guys in Western Australia directly. They'll put their contact details in if you want to have a specific Zoom call about something after this call. So this is very much a sort of networking idea. No one's particularly in charge. It's not a top-down sort of thing. It's like, if you want to contact someone else on the call, then feel free, and all the rest of it. Okay, so I'm going to go through some sort of just open questions with the guys and see how we get on. And I think we'll probably go through a chronological order, like how things started in Western Australia, you know, some basic orientations about what it's like to mobilize there. And then secondly, we'll get on to the nuts and bolts of what the mobilization process has been, how they actually specifically organize setting up the groups. And then we might look a little bit at the sort of organization that led to that success, like, you know, what working groups they have, how they organize, whether people are full-time, all that sort of thing. And then we'll finish off with some sort of major learnings that they think they'd like to pass on in summary. And I think hopefully we've got some impressive documentation so that it's not all generalizations. But the idea of this call is to get beyond the abstractions. You know, we went into suburb X and set up a group, you know, well, that doesn't really help you, does it? What you want to know is how many stalls and what days with the books in what order and when you turned up and what you said. And that's really the level of detail we're looking at when we do these trainings, because there's good evidence to show that it's the sort of micro design, as the jargon goes, that determines how successful you are. Okay, so I hope that's okay with everyone. Obviously, there's a little bit of experiment, so bear with us, you know, it's XR, you know, blah, blah, blah. So we'll see how we trundle along. Okay, so thank you so much, everyone. I'll make a start. So maybe the three of you can just introduce yourselves and when you got involved in Extinction Rebellion, and maybe one of you can just say a little bit about how things started in Perth or Western Australia. So we'll start off with Rosa, and then you just pass on to one of the others.
Yeah, so I got involved with Extinction Rebellion in Western Australia about a year and a half ago when I'd arrived in Australia. I'm originally from the UK, and I'd sort of gone to the April Rebellion in 2019 and stuff in London. And so came over to Australia and was really excited to get involved with XR here as well. That was only a few months after it had really started up here, so things were sort of just starting, but yeah, a month and a half, and I've sort of been involved in a couple of working groups and stuff since then, and mobilizing for the last maybe 6 months. Jared?
Yeah, so I was kind of around at the very, very start, but not properly involved, but I thought it was all pretty cool. And then I was a marshal at the first big mass action that that they had here. I mean, big by our standards, not by UK standards, but I was blown away by that, and I was really inspired. And so after that, it was around the same time as Rosa came here. Actually, I also got involved in a number of working groups, and then quit my job at the end of last year, and have been doing full-time mobilising since then.
Ewan. G'day, so my name's Ewan, and I was part of the first group to start up over here. We had our first meeting on the 1st of May, on May Day in 2019. And I guess we're talking about the Genesis kind of story now, aren't we, Roger, how we kind of kicked off things here?
Yeah. Just go through that briefly, yeah.
If I can. So in April of 2019, we started getting wind of what happened in London. So the impact that a group of people in a country far, far away, the ripples reached us here in the most isolated city on earth, that's Perth, Western Australia. And we, at that time, had a federal election where a lot of hope was being pinned on a government change, because the opposition at that time had a lot of better climate policies, and the incumbent government were terrible. Well, the incumbent government stayed in, and they stayed terrible. So people were absolutely devastated. About 2 weeks before that election, myself and a group of friends just got together to talk about what are we going to do about this situation. We all had young families. We're all feeling pretty despondent, and wanted to think of something that we can do beyond recycling and changing our habits, how we can make a big impact beyond elections. So we just sort of thought of the idea of having a picnic to bring the community together to talk about climate. We thought we'd pitch it the day after the election because we were quite influenced by XR's Beyond Politics approach. And so that's what we timed it as. And I think it's a good sort of thing to keep in mind when you're starting off local groups or encouraging people to start local groups. If you can work as a small group of people who are motivated and somewhat connected first, then you can more easily divide up the work of making the posters and getting the word out and finding the musicians and finding a venue, all that kind of stuff, and get a bit of momentum from the get-go. Anyway, about 200 people rocked up to our small community picnic because it was the day after this gut-wrenching, absolutely shocking election. From there, we talked about XR. We introduced what had been happening in the UK and the inspiring story that was. And we held our first Heading for Extinction talk. So I just went to the UK website. I downloaded everything we could find about how to. We got the slides, all the stuff that was made available, and followed the instructions, more or less. And 130 people came to our first Heading for Extinction talk, which was utterly overwhelming. We couldn't call all the people back. We couldn't do that follow-up work, which is really important for mobilising. But enough people stuck around and hung on, and we started working. So we really, for the first couple of months, we didn't even do any actions. So this is definitely not the way that we would recommend doing things. But we had enough critical mass that people came together and wanted to do this thing because there was nothing else. There's nothing else out there that felt effective, right? We just had a terrible election, all the usual protesting and stuff. It's not working. Things are going backwards. Perth, Western Australia is a petro state. We have, I think we're the 4th highest gas exporter on Earth, I believe. It's a crazy place where the corporations own everything. And so the complacency and the apathy here is huge. life is really good here. The level of wealth and lifestyle is really high. So the agitation, in general, a lot of people are suffering, and Aboriginal people especially, are suffering colonisation. But amongst people who are climate aware, climate active, there's nothing much to change in the world because it's really good. And so it's really hard to get things going. So we had this group of people who were inspired by the XR story, who stayed together, and we just got straight into really creating a core of working groups. That's where we kind of started off with. And we really just followed the model. We found that the principles and values were solid, and that they gave a really good platform, a foundation for a group to be able to work together and do the thing that was necessary. The demands were clear, they're universal, and the fit just felt really good to these people. So we really just formed working groups from the get-go. That was in May, and our first action was in August. So we took that long to actually hold just a die-in in the city, which we did. About 180 people came. It was a very rainy day in Perth, Western Australia. If it rains, people don't go anywhere, they don't do anything. When I say it's apathetic, people are absolute wusses over here. If you don't know what a wuss is, it's if it rains, you stay inside, don't go out. Anyway, it rained and 180 people came. We were very happy with that. There was probably about that many police as well coming because, of course, again, the ripples, the shock waves from the UK reached us over here, and the police were expecting all kinds of things. But we just did a very easy entry dying in the city. But it was good. It was empowering. A lot of people hadn't done that before, right? We'd just done protests and gone home. We hadn't really done anything disruptive. And so it was a motivating thing. That was August. I believe it was August. Then we declared rebellion openly the same way. We kind of followed a lot of the models of the UK. We declared a rebellion openly. We went to Parliament House. 400 people came this time, so we managed to double our numbers. And we did a lot of media. So that was a big media campaign that was fed by another state. So people in another state in Australia had started doing a lot of disruptive stuff, road blockades and so forth, where only one or two people would glue themselves to a road and disrupt the CBD for hours. That made the news over here. So when the media over here got wind that XR was starting in Perth, they were all over it. We had a front page on our daily newspaper, the only daily newspaper in Perth, circulated to 2.3 million people. We had a front page before we even did an action over here because of the actions of people interstate using the disruptive tactics is vitally important. So we went to Parliament House, a rally outside, and some of us went inside and declared rebellion inside and got arrested and disrupted Parliament through that process. More news, daily news, top line everywhere through the media, big buzz, a lot of momentum ensued. We still didn't roll out local groups. We still kept as quite a centralised thing. At that time, we were thinking that we really just wanted to build capacity in a very apathetic place. We wanted to make sure we had capacity able to roll out the machine of XR. So we didn't build local groups. We stayed as XR Western Australia. That's what we called ourselves. Still do as that core group. From there, we organised our next action. We did a lot of Heading for Extinction talks. Still more of a centralised thing. Leading up to the next big action, which was what we called Flood the City. Around about, we're calling it 600 people came to that one. And this was the one where we trained for and encouraged affinity groups to form. A lot of sort of creative things happened through that, where we did blockade in the city centre and sat down, and 71 people got arrested in that one event, which was by far and away a record for Perth in a sort of single civil disobedience event. A lot of press, a lot of media that kind of rolled on, but I'm going to say that we didn't have the local groups functioning. So we still really had one central group. We had a local group down in Denmark, which is a regional town, about 4.5 hours drive away, and sort of another pseudo-local group in the city. We didn't have that local group sort of network, a geographical network, and the network of people to absorb the big buzz, right? So you have a big momentum sort of driving event where people want to join, and the core crew who made the thing happen, we were cooked, mate, absolutely cooked. I wasn't answering phones for weeks after that. It was a huge, big event for us to have pulled off. All the work supporting the 71 people who got arrested was carrying on, took a lot of people's time and effort. So we didn't have the machinery in place to keep inductions going, the DNA sessions, the heading for extinction, all that machinery that can provide. We didn't really have that happening. And I think if we have done that, we would be in a much different place now, I'm sure. We kind of learned from that, and we started to think about the local group model. And I think in the UK, the mass mobilisation project had started, and we got wind of that, and again just started downloading the resources and learning the methods. Just about to roll it out, and then coronavirus hit everybody, so everything took a back step. Coming out of coronavirus, we were straight into mobilisation, so we're really just following the instructions from there. And I reckon I'm going to tap out from that one. Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks very much. That's a really good introduction, and I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with the same sort of trajectory that generally in social movement theory, dare I say, this idea there's a moment, the whirlwind, and everyone comes out on the streets, and it's a little bit chaotic, and then it rises really quickly, and then it goes down pretty quickly as well, and then you're sort of it's a matter of organizationally driven after that. And that's really what we're here to talk about today, is the success or not success of different XR groups around the world after that initial flurry is really a function of the organizational capacities. And as you said, Ewan, one of the major problems with the XR groups has been there's been a big surge, and then it wasn't capitalized on, as it were, by having people providing pathways for people to be part of groups and take on roles and what have you. And there's been many events, XR civil disobedience events, where there simply hasn't been any recruitment. And I think we're generally learning that the purpose of having a civil disobedience event or some variation on the theme is to movement build. And to do that, you have to have a team that's not doing the frontline stuff, but is doing the boring backroom stuff that actually happens to be even more important, as we sort of discover as we become more mature and professional about it, as you might say. Okay, so I suspect that sort of trajectory is sort of familiar to quite a few people on the call. So the interesting sort of side of it is what happens next. So what's interesting about Western Australia, and in my humble opinion, is that they've done really well relative to their situation being a petro state and what have you, to create this organizational infrastructure which has led to the setting up of groups. So I thought maybe, Rosa, we could split this into two bits. You could just say how you went about setting up the groups first, and then we'll just check we've got that clear. And then, for the sake of argument, we'll go on to a little bit more about the backroom organisation, and then we'll go on to questions about it. So, were you going to speak about this bit, or you and Gerard together? Are you? Anyway, so what we want to know is so we've reached a point of a big civil disobedience event. Just take it from there. What happened with coronavirus? What happened with the mass mobilisation idea? And how was that put into practice in terms of setting up these 8 or 9 groups? How did that work? And we want lots of detail, don't we? Lots of facts and figures, please. What are you doing on Monday afternoon on November the 2nd, all that sort of stuff. Okay, so off you go, thanks.
Sure. Well, yeah, as Ewan said, sort of just before COVID-19 hit, we'd sort of been discussing, what's the way forward, how we were stuck in a bit of a rut, really, and we were just sort of brainstorming ideas, and everything came back to local groups. And that was simultaneous with the time that Roger came and started giving some advice to Australia about this mass mobilisation. And so that sort of confirmed it, and we were like, yeah, okay, this is what we need to do. We need to focus on these local groups. And we were incredibly lucky in Perth in Western Australia that the pandemic lasted about a month or something. So yeah, come about May, June, we were out of lockdown. Things weren't completely back to normal, but we were able to start planning and getting some ideas about local groups and meeting back in person again. And so I think it was just the three of us were together at the end of a meeting with a couple of others, and we were just like, okay, let's just try that out. Me, Jared, and another person were all living in the same area, so we thought, yeah, let's just give it a go. We'll try setting up a local group in our area, which was the western suburbs of Perth. And so we did. Yeah, that's basically it. We decided that we'd have our first meeting on the 22nd of August in 2021. And we just advertised through letterbox drops on Facebook, through emails, both internally to our mailing list.
Right,
and
so August 2020, right?
20. Yeah. Yes, correct.
Good, just checking that. Last year.
Thanks, Roger. Okay, yes. August 2020. Yeah, and yeah, emails through our internal mailing list and some other newsletters like the Curtin Greens, which was sort of like the Greens in that area, stuff like that. And we got not a huge turnout. I think 6 or 7 people turned up, including 2 people who hadn't been involved, and us and a couple of other people who are already in XR. So not huge, but
enough, a starting point.
Exactly,
yeah.
exactly. It was exciting having a new person, because I think we hadn't really experienced having a new person for a long time. So, you know, the small wins, you got to celebrate that. And from that, we got excited, and we just thought, oh, you know, let's go and do something straight away. And we organized just a simple banner drop for a couple of weeks later on the 9th of September. And 8 people turned up to that, which was a couple of new people. The local newspaper came down, and local journalist students and stuff. So again, not hugely exciting, but for just coming out of lockdown and stuff and just getting back to normal and just trying new things, it was pretty good. And we wanted to do that to sort of let people know in the area that things were happening again, because nothing had really happened for 8 months or something. So yeah.
And also to have an action straight away, so that those people in that first meeting had something to go and do. They weren't just sitting around endlessly in meetings.
Yeah, I think that was an important thing, because meetings just bore people off. And so our aim was to try and get Heading for Extinction happening as soon as possible, because we had sort of seen, I mean, that's how I got involved. You had that inspired you and stuff. And yeah, we just thought that's what we need to try and do. So we'd planned we'd get our Heading for Extinction happening halfway through September, on the 18th of September. So then between the banner drop and then the focus was outreach for that. We had 2 stalls outside the farmers market. And our main ask from that farmers market was to get people to attend the Heading for Extinction. We didn't really ask for sign-ups and stuff like maybe we should have. Are you sharing that?
Yeah.
Cool. So Exhibit A here is Jared talking to some lovely locals about our upcoming Heading for Extinction. And yeah, we weren't actually allowed inside the farmers market because it's quite a how would you describe the area?
It's an interesting area, because it's kind of the wealthiest area in Perth, and it's quite a conservative area, but it has kind of like a sizable green minority. So, you know, there's a lot of interest in like urban deforestation and whatnot in that area. So yeah, it's a bit of a strange area, but certainly the markets was like very flash. So they didn't want the likes of us in there. But so we kind of set up, this is actually kind of on the perimeters of the market. We just set up our stall, and the rangers drove past a couple of times, but they didn't stop us. But we did go into the market, and these guys are the ukulele orchestra who play there every week. They put up a poster for us, and some of the different stalls put up posters for us. So yeah, we were kind of surprised actually that they were all of these different stalls were willing and keen to help us out.
Yeah, so yeah, we got those posters up around the farmers markets, and we were handing out flyers which were just the same but smaller and in black and white. And yeah, just had do you want to get the flyer up maybe? Yeah. And just had the information about the event. And
it looked like that basically. Hang on. Oh, sorry.
So yeah, anyway, that was our main method of promoting it. We also made sure we got out loads of these flyers in the local letterboxes. I think we got about 600 in letterbox drops around the area, and that was again all from just these 8 to 10 people we had who were committed to the local group. After we'd been at these markets, we always made sure that we had our meeting directly after that. And so like each meeting, a couple of people did drop by to our meeting after that, which was great. But we learned from that because a lot of the time they didn't quite get it. They'd sort of thought it was like an environmental thing, and then turned up at the meeting and we were talking about, you know, civil disobedience, and they were like, whoa, whoa. So I think that's, yeah, was definitely a learning curve. You know, if someone comes up and they're like, yeah, I'm really environmental, but it did scare them off. So that's definitely something we learned.
I think as well, one thing was that we did that for 3 weeks in a row. We did the stall at the markets, and then immediately after we had the meeting. So there were some people who we talked to every week for those 3 weeks. And I think that regularity definitely helped. I think one thing we've talked about learning from that stall was that at the time we were just really handing out flyers. We weren't asking for sign-ups. So we didn't get people's contact information. We couldn't follow them up. We didn't have any kind of data on them or whatever. So since then, we've definitely changed our approach to getting the sign-ups as kind of like one of the primary asks. Yeah,
100%. So yeah, did that, got flyers out, got posters out. We went down the sort of high street, I guess, of the suburb and asked all of the businesses to get some posters up. And again, we were really shocked by the number of places that were happy to do that. So we had pubs, we had the cat cafe, we had sort of like little local businesses.
The protein supplement shop.
Protein supplement shop were, really wanting to promote Heading for Extinction. So it's great. So I think we got about 30 posters up in this pretty short little high street, which is, really good. And again, I think that really helped because it was just in attracting people that wouldn't have otherwise sort of spoken to us or heard of us. And so, fast forward to the 18th of September, and we had the Heading for Extinction. And we were pretty shocked. I mean, I was feeling incredibly pessimistic beforehand, expecting a handful of people to turn up, but we got 30 plus people coming, which was pretty good for the fact. And just as extra information, the whole of Western Australia has about 2.5 million people in, most of whom are centred in Perth. So it's not a huge population. So 30 people in one of the suburbs was pretty successful for us.
For us, it's pretty good. Yeah. It was another thing that we've learned is that at this first Heading for Extinction, we didn't ask all of these people where they came from. So we didn't know exactly what had worked. Although I remember just asking informally some of these people, and some of them had come from the flyers in the letterbox. Some of them had come from the Facebook ads. But I guess that's something that we've learned now, is that we always ask people, how did you hear about this habit? Did you hear about this, so that we're not wasting our time on stuff that's ineffective?
And
can you just say what proportion? Can you remember what proportion came from word of mouth, posters, leaf?
That was where we messed up. We were still learning. I was blown away by the number of people, so I just didn't even think to do anything else. But again, that's what we've learned, and that's what we're doing now. But from the people you spoke to,
Facebook ads seem to be a pretty common one, and at this stage, letterbox drops were actually working for us quite well. We found lately they have not been working for us anywhere near as well, which we're not really sure why. Post-COVID. Yeah, it could all be to do with the COVID situation, and this was when people were still kind of excited to go anywhere. So
And what we'd planned to do in these sort of, since the first meeting that we'd been having weekly meetings, and we planned to have this heading for extinction, then the following week have an MVDA and have an action 2 weeks after that. And so the heading for extinction happened, then afterwards we promoted that we had an MVDA the following week. I think I sent pictures of that. And 25 people attended that as well, which was good. A handful came from the heading for extinction, a handful were novel. And yeah, that was pretty good. You probably know more about that.
Yeah, so we did a condensed MVDA, and then we rolled kind of immediately into action planning at the end of the MVDA. We kind of did a bit of a spiel about how important everything was, and the need for people in the local community to act. And we said, have a cup of tea for a few minutes, and then we're going to plan an action. And we rolled straight into a process where people went around the table and said what kind of actions they were comfortable with. We have in Australia something that the National Action Crew put together called the Actions Cookbook, which is specifically designed for local groups. So we handed out a few copies of the Actions Cookbook and said, what do you think would work for you? So I think it was, again, like, just not having just endless talk. People liked, I think, the sense that they could get into action pretty much straight away.
Yeah. And at the end of the heading for extinction, it wasn't just the MVDA that we promoted. We did promote like the other things that were happening. Affinity Group was having a banner painting workshop, and something else was happening. And feedback we got was that that did excite people, and they were like, wow, lots of stuff's going on. And that sort of like kept up their enthusiasm, which was interesting. Because obviously there's the line of not wanting to overwhelm people, but also give people options and stuff. Then, yeah, we had regular weekly meetings from that. And then we had our action, which was very simple. It was just a little die-in at the local shopping centre. And again, we sort of like gave the people in the group sort of power and decision-making over this, and they decided the action. It wasn't arrestable. Most of these people had never engaged in sort of anything more than marching down a road before. So this was a big deal. This was on the 10th of October. About 25 people attended. And I remember as we were checking in before we did the action, people were actually terrified about doing it. And it was just lying down in the shopping centre. They were like, what if someone sees me and recognises me? They were sort of concerned that they might not be able to show their face in the shopping centre again. Yeah, people were terrified about the idea of lying down in a costume for a while. So yeah, that was pretty wild.
But then at the end, when we checked out at the end, they were all ready for more. They were like, that wasn't enough. We want to get more disruptive. We want to have a little bit more. So I think that it was pitched pretty well. It felt a little bit lame, to be honest, but for the people we were working with, it set them up.
Yeah, for sure.
And I love this woman. She said at the end that she was no longer afraid to die after doing the dying. She said that it was a kind of transcendent moment for her. So that was cool.
So yeah, that was exciting. And after that, everyone was pumped. They were like, yeah, escalate, got to escalate, which is great. We did get some local press from it, which is cool. And we held meetings afterwards, and we did sort of more like less disruptive actions, like some wheat pasting, and that literally happened the following week or something, and which was just finding a little wall, more of a social kind of activity. But lots of people, I think maybe 10 people turned up to that. And again, just nice having stuff to do, keeping people going, which led to having our first more disruptive people were willing to risk arrest on the 7th of November. And that was, we went to the Shell headquarters and spray painted that. About 25 people turned up to that action. Oh no, actually fewer than that. About 15 people turned up to that action, I think, but it was great. We'd got rolls all filled. People were excited. No arrests actually happened, but it was good. People finally had that sort of sense of naughtiness and willing to, get into trouble and stuff, which they hadn't really felt before. which then meant it was really easy to escalate that just a couple of weeks later on the 27th of November, where we had our first definitely arrestable action. That was our mass action, and 5 people put their hand up willing to risk arrest from that, which was cool because only 9 people actually in that entire mass action were willing to risk arrest. So that really taught us having this local group made a huge difference, because we had over half the arrests of this actual mass action, because people had the support, people knew people, people felt confident, people felt trained up, people felt prepared. So yeah, that was good. And from that, just 3 weeks later, we had our own little local group action, which was arrestable, and had 2 arrests there as well. So that was just before Christmas, Merry Crisis. And again, people got really excited because it was just down the road from where they lived, but it was busy and there was arrests and there was drama, and people just really felt connection. And again, we were continuing having weekly meetings every Saturday from then.
We did another talk in the mix, another Heading for Extinction.
And with this one, most of the people came from posters or letterbox drops.
Yeah, so we were recording stuff by then. Yeah. So that was kind of the prototype, I guess. And then we took our learnings from that first one, and now we've kind of got it down to a bit of a process.
I think after we did that, we saw that it worked. We saw it was successful, and that made such a difference. And that's when it was after our mass action on the 27th of November, which had been slightly disappointing. We'd had probably half the number of people that they'd had at the mass action the previous year. So we were a bit disappointed and realized that mobilization was the way forward. So we sort of were willing to drop everything there and then and focus on mobilization. So our action working group post mass action was sort of saying, what's the point in organizing these actions if we aren't having sufficient mobilization? And we all decided to put action on hold for a few weeks and move over and just change the working group to a mobilization working group. And that's when I put my hand up to be a full-time mobilizer. Gerard,
shortly after.
Yeah, soon after that, quit your job, and Ewan had just been working all the time anyway, but then intended to do mobilizing. So yeah, Roger, do you want us to just continue from there?
Yeah. So I've been making a few notes in terms of a summary that it was important to do the stalls, put the posters up in the shops. I did a leaflet drop. This was prototyping a first setting up of a group. And then you had a quick progression onto a low level action and then a higher level action, and people progressed through various stages of sort of empowerment through that. And then you know what we're going to move on to now is, okay, you've done it with one group, so how did you roll this out? And really this is the cool part of this talk, I think, because lots of people have experience of groups setting up in a slight haphazard sort of way. So what we're going to look at now is, okay, so how do you do this in a systematic way without some big boost of loads of people doing something dramatic in a far off country like the UK, but which is basically fueled by the organization and the activity itself, if you see what I mean. So yeah, let's go through that. I know there's 1 or 2 questions coming, and we'll have those in a few minutes. But yeah, take us through this systematization of that experience, of that setting up of that one group.
Cool. So shall we just run through about that?
Yeah. I think we had a bit of an advantage here in that we had the core regional group or state group that had already established and already had quite a lot of capacity to support this systematic rolling out of local groups. So by that I mean we had the keys, we had the handle on our database of signups for the state, So, 2,500 odd people who had given us, email subscriptions, which include a postcode we call here, or zip code, or whatever you call it, a locality. And we had working groups that were, I guess we convinced that this mobilisation process was the way to go, who could rally around and support it. So, for example, a team of people who could do the Heading for Extinction talk well, an outreach team who had the flyers on hand ready to go, designers, website, all that kind of stuff. All that core infrastructure was already in place to support this systematic rolling out. Hey? So we were able to look at the database, find those zip codes or locations that had the most people in them, ring around or find people who could be the champions in that area and could help support it, and then roll out the process that you guys want to talk about. The process. So I guess I just wanted to preface it by saying that we had the advantage of a pretty solid chunk of infrastructure and dedicated people able to support this kind of rolling out. But got to say, kind of just following the instructions. So the instructions that were laid out in April that I was downloading in April 2019 of how to roll this stuff out, kind of the same instructions that are available now on the rebellion.global website of how to start your local group. Kind of just doing that, but we're doing it, I guess systematically, and with the advantage of having a state database to work from, and learning. We're doing a lot of learning, right, as we go and so forth, and tweaking that core instruction to local context and using different, picnic here or a pub there or a hotel there or a childcare centre there, whatever, as a seed groups. Way to go, but you guys want to talk about that?
Yeah, I think that's really important. Ewan had done a load of groundwork setting up sort of the state level SOS, which we wouldn't have been able to sort of build from that had that groundwork not been done. Because when this action working group decided to drop action and just focus on mobilisation, we also invited the outreach working group to come join us. And at this time, a lot of the sort of working groups had lost some capacity because of the lull post-COVID. So I think they had maybe 2 people in outreach, I think, that came and joined the sort of 5 or 6 people from action. So we'd sort of presented it to the rest of the working group saying, this is what we need to focus on. You saw that our numbers are dropping. This is what we need to do. Everyone needs to help us do this mobilizing. And people were happy with that. They saw the fact that the Western Suburbs local group had worked. They saw the fact that the mobilizing had happened in the UK, and that was just so important. And they were really happy to support us, which was great. So so we started meeting weekly from the end of December, I think, and plan sort of basic things such as getting rebel ringing, the sort of calling campaign to people on the database going, and trying to build a capacity building event, which we're calling Grow the Rebellion, where people could sort of come along, find out what we're about, and we could just get them into roles and really get them going. From January, some nationally coordinated mobilization Zooms had happened. The national mobilization team had sort of been running them, and it was a induction kind of thing. And there are a couple of people from our state who had attended there, so we invited them to our working group as well. And by then we had 9 people in the working group, which was pretty good. That was the biggest working group I think we had in the whole of XR and WA at the time. The 3 of us were sort of trying to work full time, just doing this background work and planning and stuff like that. We hadn't really started rolling anything out by then. But it was great because at that point, the finance working group had realized how much work we were doing and were willing to give us a VLE, a volunteer living expense, of $200 Australian dollars a week per person in exchange for the full-time mobilizing we were doing. And that really helped. That made a world of difference because the 3 of us were able to have some sort of financial support in exchange for all the work that we were doing. And that is when we started really trying to set up these local groups.
Yeah. So should we go, I guess the first thing that we were doing, and Rosa was doing most of this, was like database work. So we would look at the postcodes, how could we group postcodes together? Where was there enough signups in the database to make it worth our while? What were the numbers we were looking at to get?
Yeah, we were sort of combining a few postcodes to try and get at least 100 people really, on average, 100 rebels already in the area.
So yeah, so I think that's important that because most of those 100 people already on the database aren't going to engage. So there was one group that we tried to start, which someone from that local area was just keen to start a local group there. So of course we supported them, but they only had kind of 40, 50 signups in the area, and it was just too little for them to succeed. So I think that targeting is pretty important, having that kind of number.
Yeah, for sure. And so, yeah, once we'd sent out an email, once we decided on the areas that we were going to try and set up a local group and the postcodes that fitted into that, we sent out an email to everyone saying, we want to try and set up a group in your area.
I think but before that, didn't we just send an email to the people who'd been opening their emails, to the keen people?
Was that the first one? Okay.
Yeah. So I think what we did before we sent out the general one, we would try and get like a champion in that area, or someone who could help us just to like drop off posters and find a venue or whatever, and he had a little bit of that local knowledge. So we just target the people in the database who'd been engaging with us and say, hey, you guys are reading your emails. Do you want to make this happen where you are? And some of the time, maybe half of the time, we got someone or a few people who were keen, and that was always really, really, really useful, because they knew where the good hall was to have a talk and who what cafes to put stuff in and whatnot.
Yeah, and it wasn't always easy. We were sort of expecting to, be able to find some really dedicated people in that area, and they just drive it, and we were like, oh, that'll be fine. And then I think the first one or two, we'll go over that again. The first one or two, we struggled, and we were like, we're going to have to do more work. So yeah, basically what we did was got the email list of the people in that postcode and on Action Network, and we were able to filter out the people who seemed to be engaging, so the people who had opened a certain amount of emails in the last few months, because they clearly cared enough about XR to open the email, which most people don't seem to do. So that sort of signified that they had some kind of involvement with Extinction Rebellion, and from that there were normally sort of about 10, 15 people that had opened 5 emails in the last 3 months. And so we sent a targeted email to them saying, we want to set up a little group in your area, explaining why that was important, explaining, the benefits, the community building, the fact you're all local, and asking if they'd mind helping us, whether that would be from helping us find a venue, giving us sort of intel about the area, or literally just doing some letterbox drops or putting up posters. And yeah, on the whole, I think on average we probably got 3 people, 3 to 4 people willing to do that each time.
And we should probably say we've kind of missed a step here, in that the initial step for all of these groups was the Heading for Extinction talk.
Yes.
So it was kind of like, we'd had those meetings in the Western Suburbs one beforehand. We'd had a number of meetings. We kind of condensed that process down to just getting these few keen people and then helping them to organise a Heading for Extinction talk. So the first time people would generally get in the same room was the talk itself.
Yeah, for sure. And so once that had happened, there were a couple of ways we'd get, say, flyers and posters to people. Either we'd drop them off, or we'd send them to the local office works, which I guess is just the
printing shop.
A printing shop, that's a chain. And, we'd pay for it. We'd be willing, we'd say, keep the receipts if you're doing it, and we can reimburse you, trying to make it as accessible as possible. Don't want like any money restrictions to hold them back and stuff. And it was good, we'd, get them to the Heading for Extinction. That's true. And so in the lead up to that we tried a couple of methods as well as these posters. And one of that was this rebel ringing. We got this team that we'd created through the mobilization working group to bring up people in the area, telling them about the heading for extinction. And that level of connection just seemed to make so much more of a difference. Particularly if they'd received an email already, the conversation would sort of go, oh, you probably received an email, this is happening, it'd be really cool for you to come along. And that level of connection helped. Depending on time, if that wasn't working or there were too many people to go through it, we couldn't make all the phone calls, we'd also send out a text, which again would just text blast to everyone in the area saying, come to this event.
And I think what we eventually learned was send the text first, send the text to everyone first, and then ring them. Because if they've already got the text, they'll say, oh yeah, I got a text about that. They've got the details there.
And people just seem so much more likely to read a text than an email. Because you get so many emails, but it's far rarer to get a spam text.
Yeah.
Not that we're spam, of course. But so yeah, we'd sort of fine-tuned the way we were doing these heading for extinctions. So the idea was we'd have a member or two of the mobilization team who would go and they'd really focus on the meeting and greeting. They'd have a sign-up sheet on the desk, which was right at the front. Then we'd have two of the central heading for extinction presenters who would come in and they'd do the talk, and we'd have one of us present, one of the full-time mobilizers. And at the start, people would come in.
We have to, we make sure you have to set the expectation at the start of the talk that this is not just a talk, it's not just an education info talk session. The expectation we set at the start is to say, hey folks, great, thanks for coming, you've come to this talk, it's an amazing first step, just be aware that this is about taking action, and this is about you taking action. And then boom, you lay the talk on them. Most of you have probably seen that talk. It's very inspiring. It's very heavy, but the key thing is that it's a call to action. And so, we set that expectation at the beginning of the talk, so that as people are watching this talk, they have it in their mind that they are there to take part and to be a part of something and to contribute. And then we finish it with.
And I'll get it up in a tick. I have written down all of the micro design of this heading for extinction. I'll put the link in the chat in a tick, because that's sort of from start to finish. I'll just grab it in a tick.
Okay.
So yeah, we'd get there, mobilizer, sort of introduce themselves, thank the people who had come and already done the posters. The talk would happen, then at the end, emphasizing the fact we're not here for this talk, we're not here to just sit around, we're here for action. So therefore hang around afterwards and we're going to plan how we're going to meet and do action.
Yeah. Another thing with that is I think as it went on, we would more and more, the mobilizer part at the end of the talk, we would word really, really strongly. So it would be like, okay, I'm going to ask you to do a few things now. Like, this is the part where I ask you to do what we need to do. And then the first thing we ask them to do is to quit their job and work full time. And then you say, and if you can't do that, do you have one day a week that you can give up? Do you have an evening a week? Think about how much time you have. Next thing we do is we ask them for money. And then the final thing we do is ask them to stay around after a cup of tea and have a 15-minute meeting about how they're going to start the local group in the area. And the first time we did it, I remember thinking, oh, they're all going to leave. No one's going to stay. Every single person in that room stay for the formation meeting, because I think that the talk is really effective, and then the sequence of the talk and the emotional power of it, finished with that strong call to action, means that they're in already at that point.
Can I butt in and say, this is not something we invented, it's something we learned off Roger and Co. Is that key strong call to say who's going to quit their job and do this sets the expectation that that's what's required, because as we all know, that's what's required. And that's part of XR's truth telling. This is what's needed. We need everyone getting behind this for survival. So what Gerard said there is that's quite important, because no one really does quit their job, but they have it in their mind that people are, and that they're expected to give up that soccer training or your book club or whatever. Bail that and start your local group, mate. That's the most important thing you can do in your life. Haven't you just seen the talk? Yeah. The life's at stake. We're not talking about you know, a lifestyle choice here. It's about survival. And so having that, you know, we didn't do that for a long time. We didn't have a call, a strong call, and people just believed that they never came back. But once Gerard and Rosa started introducing that strong call, hey, who's quitting their job? Who's dedicating their life to this? You see the change start very, very quickly. It doesn't really scare people off like you think it does. It makes them understand that this is really important. They won't quit their job, most of them. Some have, some do, but other people realise that, oh, actually, this is important.
Absolutely. And yeah, as you said, it's coming from a place of truth. Like, if we weren't working full time, we would have not been able to do all of this. Like, I think having the full-time mobilizers just made such a huge difference. So yeah, we were pleasantly surprised that every single person stuck around. Like, and we sort of allowed them initially a chance to just debrief after the talk, sort of that allowed the personal connection between the group, which was the sort of first step of a local group forming. Because what we'd found with the Western suburbs that we'd set up, people had sort of said, yes, I love this personal connection. I love that we're actually just friends here and we're saving the world together. And I think that's what really helps groups stay formed and keep going and stick around.
And yeah, that little first check-in just allows us to introduce regen, I guess, as well as part of the culture of the group from the very, very start, which I think is useful.
Yeah, for sure.
And then the rest of the meeting, and we try and keep it real tight, is just working out this big, bold question here. When are we next going to meet? And we get someone to take the minutes. So like it's offhanded from the start.
Yeah, we print it off in advance, provide a piece of paper, the pen, everything that's needed.
Yep. So normally they choose the same date in a week's time because they're all free at that time. So they'll probably be free in a week. And we do say to them, it's good to make it happen in a week. The local groups that are doing well, in our experience, are the groups that meet weekly. The ones that start having a fortnight, a month between meetings don't have that cohesion. So we say that to them from the start.
Yeah, I think we're setting the culture from the start, both about the importance, the emergency, and the fact, you know, you need to have these meetings really does help. So groups that try to set themselves up without our support are the ones that haven't really worked because they haven't had that kind of thing. No one wants to meet, no one really gets it, no one's really inspired by action. So yeah.
So that culture setting, I think there's two parts that have been successful. Is the urgency. So we should meet in a week, guys. Like, we're here together now. You've seen the talk. You are the group. When are you going to meet next week?
Within a week, yeah.
And also is that we try to stay back, we try to stay hands off that process. So this template that Gerard's showing is what we made to kind of encourage that group to take these roles and to do the work. So, you know, Rosa, Gerard, or whoever's there at the end, just say, hey, it's you. You're the group. You're deciding when you meet, and here's a template we suggest that's going to help you do it, but you do it. Now, who's going to take the pen and write down the names and numbers on this template? So we don't do it like at all. We set that culture to make them be the group.
Yeah, I think that's so important. Like, from the start, they're not looking for someone to guide them. They know that it's on them. Like,
the other thing here with this as well is that because we're splitting things up into roles, this is kind of almost the beginning of SOS. Especially like the last role here is follow-upper, who just checks up that everyone's done everything. And basically that's like the ground of internal coordinator. But one thing we haven't done well with our local groups, like one thing I think we need to work on more is instilling that SOS into the local groups. We have it really strong in our working groups, but not so much in the local groups. There's a start here, but that's something that probably requires more support.
And I think an important thing to add in terms of staying connected and stuff, we made sure that the last slide on the Heading for Extinction would always be about inviting people to join a Telegram chat. And that's the main sort of app that we use for communication here, because we could literally put a link and a QR code or whatever it was for people to download the app and immediately join the chat. We'd set that up in advance. We'd make it public so they could join it there and then, and we just call it whatever the local group was called. For example, XRWA Scarborough, the group we set up in Scarborough. And in that little break between the meeting ending and coming together for this, we supported people in downloading the app and getting it on. So straight away, they were all connected. They were all on the same group chat, and these minutes could be uploaded straight to that. So everyone had everything, which, yeah.
And it was always like exciting after the talk. You'd get home and there'd be all these messages like, oh, it was great to meet you all tonight. I can't wait to work with you or whatever. So yeah, just that it was already there, that sense of being together and having a common purpose and something that united them.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't know. We're going real. How are we going, Roger? What do you want from us?
Yeah. Well, it's all great stuff, isn't it? So let's just take stock of it a little bit. So it seems like, you know, the things that I'm getting from this, I don't know what everyone else is there's a real systematic way of setting up the group, right? You're getting the database, you're contacting the people who've already responded on that database to go and be champions, which have set up the meeting, the venue, the local organization. Then you're doing this publicity side of it. People are turning up. You're doing the Heading for Extinction talk, but it's got a really clear, strong call to action. Like you're sort of what you might call anchoring it on, you give up your job and work down from that rather than work up from, you know, do you want to do a bit of leafleting or whatever? So there's a really strong expectation to do something that corresponds to the seriousness of what's being said in the talk, which we all know about. And then there's a really clever micro design that you're not just saying, we'll contact you, you know, come to a meeting at some point. It's all done there and there in person, which obviously relies upon us being post-COVID. But you can see some of the main principles of mobilization here, which is you've actually physically got people making commitments within, you know, 15 minutes, half an hour of actually seeing the talk. So they're writing stuff down. The other important element here is they're writing it down themselves. They've got the form in front of them. It's not like someone's doing it for them. So like the physical act of writing your name down, believe it or not, is really significant in terms of them owning the process. And then the last thing I'm getting from it is this idea of getting them on a group there and then. Again, you've got that proximity principle that, you know, within 10 minutes of finishing the Heading for Extinction talk, they've actually got it written. They've got their group set up. It's on Telegram. Obviously, it might be different in other countries, but they're all there connected with each other and they can emote and support each other after the emotional experience of the Heading for Extinction talk. So maybe you can move on then to how you organized, I think, setting up about 8 groups, because this is the sort of exciting element to it, I suppose, which has propelled you into international fame, relatively speaking. Yeah, no pressure. But what's, you know, I think a lot of people probably on the call have got the experience of setting up a group, you know, and sometimes it goes well and sometimes it doesn't go well. But the real genius of what you guys have done, I think, is you set up, you know, group after group. So just say how that went and give us some facts and figures, how many were successful, you know, how many weren't. You know, this is a real world example here, right? It's not everything you do super works, but just run us through it chronologically. And then we'll go for we'll go on a little bit about the organization behind it all, which I think Ewan's covered a little bit, but it'd be good to reiterate those principles about how you built the teams and what have you, and the processes to get this on the go. But let's just give us the narrative of how, you know, how did these groups set up? Give us their names, you know, give us some facts and figures, and let's see how it went.
Sure. So, I mean, we've got kind of 12 local groups that are at least semi-active, although maybe not now. But yeah, we kind of were aiming on having one Heading for Extinction a week was the goal. So basically, we'd normally start the program about 2 weeks before. So we kind of mapped it all out. So we had, this week we're going to do Scarborough, next week we're going to do Melville, the following week, whatever, and then kept track of it like that. We did run into a problem, which was that we were often scheduling these for Wednesday nights. And then all of a sudden we had like 3 or 4 local group meetings happening at the same time on Wednesday nights, needing our support. So that was a little bit difficult, but yeah.
Yeah, I think what made it work was the fact that we weren't having to do everything. We weren't having to do the talk. We weren't having to do the sort of welcoming stool sign up bit at the front. We did have the team behind us. We did have the external people doing the talk, and we did have the rest of the mobilization working group able to give us the support. And we did have these templates. So we'd created templates for the first 4 meetings. And during this, we were building to our next mass action, which was happening on the 22nd of March. So I think we had about 2 months from, so the end of January, building to this mass action on the 22nd of March, where we were trying to start a new group every week. And again, that sort of gave direction to the group and made it exciting and stuff like that. And so, yeah, we were able to have these agendas set. So if, you know, we had 3 different local group meetings happening then and we couldn't attend them, or they literally just had to work through these agendas, which again, I can share in the chat. And they are pretty simple. The first one was background sort of principles and values and looking at action. They looked through the Action Cookbook and would decide on a small action to do. Most went for something simple like a banner drop. But we weren't too concerned about that because we knew there was this mass action coming up within about 2 months maximum. So that was fine. Then the next meeting was sort of focused on, again, the action and getting roles and also mobilization. And that's sort of what it evolved to. It was like half looking at action, half looking at mobilization. And so we set up, I've got some of the stats here. We have, here, should I share the screen for that? Or?
Yeah, why not? Yeah.
So these were from 4 of the groups that we set up, just some of the metrics that I gathered. So these were the ones that we'd intended to set up. These were the ones that we'd looked at the areas, discovered that there were no local groups and wanted to try and set up. And they were all sort of, yeah, spread around the metropolitan area or a bit further out. And we sent out the emails, we got some flyers out, we got posters out, and we got some paid promo out. At the same time as this, there were some other groups that sort of rebooted with our help, and then also Dianella. There were, yeah, people who saw that it was working and got excited and wanted us to help them set it up in their area. So we had Melville, Scarborough, the Hills, Rockingham, Dianella, and Vic Park, and what were the
just
other?
all the groups.
Yeah, yeah.
North Perth, Fremantle. So that, yeah, Fremantle. Yeah, I don't know what they all were. Yeah.
There's a note here for in Perth, Western Australia, our public transport system sucks.
Yeah.
So for people to travel to a central meeting was a clear obstacle that we had identified about the first year of XR here. And so a key selling point is that people just want to be able to just roll down the street, you know, drive. Everyone drives everywhere. Just drive down the street to their local group. So that was quite a demand. Hey, you know, people were like, oh, I want one in my area because I don't want to drive for half an hour to somewhere else.
A quick question: the number of rebels, was that the number of rebels for that place in the database, or what's?
Yeah, on the mailing list.
And how do you get so many rebels in the database from the start?
So the mass actions are where we get the signups. In the trend in our email database, you can see very clearly that the peaks, the escalations coincide with the timing of the mass actions. That's when we go to the city centre and blockade, you know, and get all the media. So we've had a very good run with our media here. We've focused quite heavily on it, on trying to talk to journalists, you know, beforehand and get kind of a good rapport and a good inside scoop with them. And then, you know, the notoriety of Extinction Rebellion has helped us to get big media. So we've always topped the news. Whenever we've had a mass action that has included arrests and disruption, we've always run top news on the nightly news stations, the free-to-air TV channels here, and usually got pretty close. Not always front page, not front page, but you know, in the newspaper the next day. So that coincides directly with our sign-ups, like quite clearly. There's a big peak there. So in Western, we've got 3,005 sign-ups now. We just saw crack the 3,000. We should have a party or something. In Western Australia, so the population here is at 2.3 million. Perth, I think, has 2.2 or something, 2.1 million.
Yeah, should we? I've just been told we've got 35 minutes left, so we do want a little bit of time for questions. But just to summarise, there, you were basically setting up, you know, you had your team and you set up this sort of process once a week, and that got you to 8 to 10 groups in 2 months. Those are the core stats here. So it shows that you can move through fairly quickly setting groups up. And it's worth emphasising that there was a mass action to organise for. So that gave it gave a purpose for the group. You weren't just setting the group up because you're setting a group up. You're setting a group up because there's going to be this action, and then there's some sort of focus. So what was interesting, I think, which maybe many of you aren't familiar with, is this idea of having this team that just goes bang, 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 you know, into this suburb, into this suburb, into this suburb, and off we go. So let's just spend 5 minutes just going through that backroom organisation again, because a lot of people, you know, just focus on the externalities of it. But the fact of the matter is that this happened in a few places around Wood, and it's always been through having a solid team that works on it, which doesn't mean millions of people do, but it does mean some. So just go through a few facts and figures and of how your team was built and organised.
As in, so the mobilisation team, is that what we're talking
Yeah,
about?
the mobilisation team, yeah. Like how many, who was working full time, how many, you know, what division of labour did you have?
Yeah, well, when we first set it up, we had, like, within the first few weeks of it starting, we had 9 active members, 3 of whom were full-time, and the others who took on sort of lower commitment roles. So we had like a rebel ringing coordinator, we had a wheat pasting coordinator, we had a sort of food coordinator for all of the events, because we realized just how much food draws people to events. And we had,
I guess, and talks and trainings is kind of part of our mobilisation group as well. So the person who coordinates the talk, so that makes it quite useful, because then, yeah, where we just say, we need a heading for extinction for these dates, can you sort it out? And it's sorted.
Yeah, and she had sort of, you know, a list of 8 presenters or something who would be able to, yeah, just be able to do the talk. So they weren't actually in the mobilisation group, but they were definitely working alongside it. We had a stores coordinator, we had...
Basically, we've tried to set up coordinator roles for each of the 8 methods of mobilisation. Yeah. So the idea is that they can be a contact point for local groups in that method, and also that they can provide resources for that method as well. Yeah,
methods
being... Just go through what those are. So you had coordinators for what?
We've got stores.
Yeah.
We've got flyering. So yeah, you know, handing out flyers and posters. I think that's included. Yeah. There's door knocking. There's rebel ringing. There's the town halls or the heading for extinction talks. That's 5.
Yeah.
Film screenings, which we've done a few of fairly successfully.
Dinner parties.
House parties, dinner parties, picnics, that kind of stuff.
And then action.
And actions.
Which we didn't really sort of include in the mobilisation working group, because that was just happening anyway, really. And we had a whole actions working group to help support with that. So yeah, that was kind of our focus, get that rolling, make sure all the local groups had support with that, as well as us being able to organise it on a central level. So we had the sort of mobilization working group coordinator getting the posters and the flyers out for this mass action that was happening. And again, this mass action was so helpful because it gave people something to be mobilizing towards. I think where we've really struggled since then, not having this actual thing to mobilize towards, that's made it a lot more challenging.
Just a date. You just need a concrete date. If you say
yeah.
September or October, it's so much harder than saying September the 22nd.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, because mobilization was this new, cool, sexy little working group, people were excited. And I think we built it to about 12 active people in that lead up, all of whom had roles and were taking on, and we were meeting weekly. And yeah, from there, we were able to organize all these events and local groups without, and I'm not saying it was easy when we were setting up a local group every week, even though theoretically it was just one heading for extinction a week to support, like then the follow-up and making sure we had to send out all of these emails to everyone and organize all the calling for it. It did take a lot of work, but it was definitely worth it.
One other thing that we have in there is local group coordination. So we have a role of local group coordinator who facilitates a fortnightly meeting of the external coordinators of the local groups, basically as an information exchange both ways, and also an information exchange with the action working group. So that helps to give that common sense of cohesion and purpose as well, and also allows us to organise some trainings as well.
Yeah, I think that was really helpful because it made the local groups connected to the state groups. So although we made a huge effort to try and attend the first 4 meetings when we could, that wasn't always feasible with the amount of meetings that were happening at the same time. And so having this local group coordinators meeting happening on a Monday evening really helped, because it gave, and it's still running, and it's how the local groups are connected to the main system, and it's how information is passed along. And also we make sure we were gathering metrics in the lead up, so asking people how many people are attending their meetings, and asking them how many people were being willing to get arrested on our March 22nd action and stuff like that. So yeah, having that as well gave people a bit of a drive, I think.
Yeah, great. Any other final comments, and then we'll go to questions.
I was going to say, your original kind of point there was what the backroom mechanics were. I guess they were daily, we'd be looking at the database, finding places and finding people, creating scripts for the calling, so that and empowering those other volunteers, part of the mobilisation team, to be able to call the people in that postcode area to set up the, to mobilise for the heading for extinction and stuff. We do a lot of talking and brainstorming around those templates, say the meeting templates, and then just the daily support of people in those groups to actually run those meeting templates. So I think it speaks to Julie's question there. Local groups want direction. People do, hey, like some people want really full autonomy and, want a sort of an anarchist approach, but most people are conditioned to be taking leadership. Sort of a balance between leadership and autonomy, hey? So we kind of tell them that, all right, your first meeting is this, your second meeting is that, your third meeting is that, but what you decide in those meetings, that is up to you. But the mechanism, the template that seems to be working is first meeting is this, second meeting is that, third meeting is that, and we're going to share those templates, aren't we?
Yeah.
So I think it's quite important that they know there's a core of volunteers like them who are working to support them to do their job, their work.
Great. So just to summarize somewhat then, we've got this situation in Western Australia where there's 3 full-time people. They've got a weekly meeting with about 9 people. Everyone's got a set role, whether they're doing, sorting out the heading for extinction speakers, doing the publicity, doing the leafleting, and what have you. And it's driven by sequentially going through the database and saying there's 100 people in that suburb, right, we're going to do that this week. There's 100 people in that suburb, we're going to do that in 2 weeks' time, and rolling through. So there's groups are being set up. So I'm aware that, this session is obviously limited. We're talking about setting groups up. There's a big piece about how to maintain the enthusiasm in groups, which we probably hold another session on in the future, and obviously is how to do actions. But what I want to just acknowledge is not everyone around the world has got a 2.5 million city with 2,000 signups. Maybe there's less than that. In that case, you might want to come to the meeting in 2 weeks' time, I think it is, with Will in Portland, where there was very few signups, and it was driven more by doing stalls. So to do 4 or 5 stalls a week, they were getting 100 signups per week, and they were delivering 3,000 leaflets, putting up around 50 to 100 posters, and doing 3 or 4 stalls in order to create a Heading for Extinction talk with 10 or 20 people in it, let's say. So I think that's probably the 2 mechanisms, and that answers the problem in some countries where you didn't have that first flurry of a big 500-person Extinction Rebellion event early on, and you're still working from fairly low numbers. So those seem to be the 2 mechanisms: is to use the database, or to go out and do leafleting, postering, flyering, tabling, stalling, or whatever you want to call it. Okay, so the other thing I just wanted to acknowledge here, which again we're going to talk about in the next session, is about fundraising. Is you probably might have heard that 3 of the people got voluntary living expenses, and where this has been done successfully around the world, it has relied upon a few people getting a small amount of money to work full time, and that seems to be key to creating the organizational solidity that is required in order to churn this thing out. But as you can see, we're not looking at hundreds of people here. Most of the teams that have done this around the world have been around 10, 15 people max, and 3 or 4 people that have worked full time, some of which of course don't need living expenses because they're okay. But obviously it's useful to have that to build that solidity. So I hope that's a reasonable summary. So if you can keep the questions mainly to this process of setting groups up, rather than how to change the world generally, that would be good. We'll go for about 15-20 minutes. Sorry, I haven't got too much time to do it, and but the details will be in the chat, I think, on contacting the guys, and they'll send out to everyone a little pack with all the various checklists and all the rest of it. Okay, so if you want, if you want to speak, put your hand up, or Andre, how do people? Andre, you do this bit because you're an expert at all this stuff.
Right, let's see who would like to ask a question, either by raising your hand on screen or digitally. If you click on your participants menu, if you're on a desktop, you should be able to raise a hand. Not all at once. Clearly the talk was very comprehensive. Thank you guys, that's great. I'm not sure how to pronounce that. Dag.
Yeah, Dag is my name. I'm from Exxon, Norway, and I was wondering, like, when you ask people to quit their job, how does that look like? Is that like, do you ask the whole group, then so you quit your job, and then wait for a response, and like they're supposed to raise their hand, something like that? Or how do they respond in any way?
No, normally we just say, we just kind of say it to the whole group. We don't wait for a response then and there. I'd be interested to try doing it like that. I wouldn't do it one-on-one, but it'd be interesting to see if anyone puts their hand up. Yeah.
I reckon the physical opt-out would be cool. So it's like, hey, who's inspired to make change? Put your hand up. Who's gonna give up their job?
Just a bit of a step up.
Or like, put your hand down if you're not going to give up your job or something.
Yeah, I was also wondering if you could share the Action Cookbook.
Yes.
Yeah, we can.
Yeah,
we'll find
sure.
a link. Yeah.
Well, I think if you just send out all of the resources, I'll make a note to add in the Action Cookbook to it.
Just at the danger of interfering, just to add on that, Dag, when we used to have meetings of about 50, 100 people in London, I would get up at the end of each meeting and say, this is an emergency, give up your job. And then I'd say, come and see me afterwards. So you haven't got the embarrassment of someone putting their hand up necessarily. And I'd always get 1 or 2 people come up to me afterwards complaining about how dire their job was. and I built up like 8 or 9 people in London. Obviously, this is a big city, who gave up their jobs in order to work part-time or full-time. So give people the option of part-time. A lot of people, you know, would do that. So that's the way that I did it. But obviously, like, it's a great, you know, it's a massive, I mean, I don't think anyone can emphasize too strongly how important and brilliant it is when you've got someone working full-time. All the mobilizations around the world have been driven by some people working full-time, which isn't to say for a moment that you don't need people doing 5 hours a week, right? But it's really important. It's a secret sort of element to it, as you might say.
Sorry, just to quickly interrupt with, in terms of resources, we'll publish this recording on the XR World YouTube channel. And then if you guys send Rosa Ewan and Gerard, if you send me the resources, we can link to that in the video's description, and we'll probably post the same in the Mattermost and the XR World public discourse server as well. So there's at least 3 places where you can go to for the resources. Any other questions? Comments?
I've got a comment.
Pontus, I see, and then I see Doug. So Pontus, then Doug, and I'm not sure if I heard someone else.
Yeah, we've seen a problem in Sweden where we had local working groups in the bigger cities. And then it was very difficult to make local groups because the new rebels tend to get involved in the working groups instead of creating new local groups. Have you experienced the same problem?
Kind of the reverse problem, I think, we have here now. Yeah, what we've kind of found is like everyone who's in a working group is also active in a local group, but not vice versa, if that makes sense. So we are at the moment, we've actually just for the next few weeks, we're kind of dropping setting up anything new groups, and we're just working on integrating people into working groups because we've had kind of the opposite problem. I think we've had the advantage compared to other states in Australia that all of our working groups were on board with mobilisation in the first place, whereas in other states it's been more difficult because there was working groups were unsure or whatever, and they've had problems like that, I think. But yeah, I don't know. I think we were just lucky in that people were readily accepted the idea here.
Yeah, and I think people find the idea of local groups more pleasant because they are just so much closer. Like as Ewan said, you know, you could be having to drive like 40 minutes to get into the city where some of the meetings take place. So the idea of having a local group is way more like palatable.
And way more, probably more regenerative as well, and more social. I think that people enjoy the local groups because you're with your community, whereas a working group is a little bit more down to business.
Okay, Pontus, I see your agreement, so I'm assuming that's okay for you. Doug, as a Doug Swain. You're still muted if you're speaking, Doug.
Sorry.
There we go.
I'm a bit of a Luddite. So I learned a lot from this presentation and learned that we did a lot of things incorrectly. But in New Brunswick, we have kind of a particular problem. And that's the population of New Brunswick is about 800,000 people, and most of them are rural. So we've really had a hard time getting many people to join XR. And those that do don't really seem to be very dedicated. Like, I think we got about 220 people signed up and only 20 people have ever done anything. So any suggestions about how we can deal with the sparseness of the province and try to get a critical number of people involved?
Oregon, are you doing the Heading for Extinction talks, Doug?
Yep. Yeah, we. Well, I was the only one who did them, but I guess I had about 4 or 5 when we first started up 2 years ago. And really, part of it is probably because of the pandemic, because things just came to a halt in March 2019, and particularly, I think everyone was burned out by Christmas of 2020. So now it's a question of kind of resuscitating XR and getting at least those 20 people active again, and then trying to build from there. But I mean, a lot of things you suggested today were very helpful, and I'm definitely going to try to follow your advice when I do more talks to, I guess, try and rebuild. But I think general apathy is a bit of a problem, and fortunately, the local university had a really good environmental group, and they got, you know, marches of 2,000 people in Moncton. But of those 2,000 people, maybe 20 were from XR.
I think, I mean, the formula that XR cracked, you know, is pretty key. Actions that are sacrificial and dedicate the, you know, the drama of, the drama of the action, and then you back it up with the talks. We found the same thing. People who join the movement without having gone to a talk and also gone to an induction. So they haven't seen and learned the real emergency through the Heading for Extinction talk, and then they haven't learned the mechanics of the movement through the induction. They tend to bounce or they drop off. You know, they don't understand how important it is to be doing this thing, A, and then B, that if we do this thing, it'll work. So I think we've kind of relearning this all the time. You know, we've got to try to get people, if they haven't been to a talk, get them to a talk. If they haven't been to an induction, get them to an induction. If you can do it in that order, that's great. But if not, that order doesn't matter. As long as they can, you know, really get the gravity and get the mechanics, that's really important. It's not unique to XR. This is a movement theory type thing. You have to have foundational understanding of why we're doing the thing and how to do the thing is critically important. I think.
But does an action of 30 people create the impact that you need to get people?
They'll get arrested. Get them all arrested. Dedicate the, you know, show the dedication, show the problem, show the sacrifice. Yeah.
Well.
It's not like, even after we've set up all these local groups, it's not like suddenly we don't have to do anything. Like, there is still, you know, a core team that are having to do a lot of work, and, you know, put in lots of time and energy, and the same sort of people crop up again. So it's probably going to be the same sort of small group of people for a while, but then with that and with these actions and with this stuff, hopefully more people will get inspired. You just need a few. Just like a couple of really keen people who we got in that first local group that suddenly gave it so much new energy, and we weren't expecting it. One was literally the mother of someone who wanted to go to the Heading for Extinction talk, and then she just had made such a difference. She didn't even want to get involved in the first place. So you just got to keep trying, and eventually people will come through. Like, it's not like it's a regular thing, unfortunately, or at least we found, but sometimes you do find someone who just gives a huge boost, really. It's about persevering again.
Yeah, I mean, one individuals who are super motivated and have initiative can just make so much difference. It's partly a luck thing, I think, about who the people are that you have in that room in the first meeting.
Right. Sorry, I'm on a satellite internet, so there's a big time delay that you may have noticed, but yeah, so I just have to look for that 1 or 2 inspiring people, eh?
It's hard, but we've also found our rural groups, because Western Australia is a massive geographic space, massive, and our rural groups we haven't had much success with. So I think that it is much harder as well.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay, well, thanks very much.
Then I see Paul Sheekey's had his hand up.
Okay, yeah. It's a boring question, but it really puts people off. Platforms and communication. So you're saying within the local group itself, you have a Telegram and they sort of stick to that you set up for them beforehand. Right, that makes sense. And then in terms of So these are all in-person meetings, which something that we're struggling with in the UK now because we're not allowed to hire venues and meet inside and things like that. But then for the bigger meetings, when the local groups come together, are they in-person meetings as well, or is that like a Zoom meeting?
We have that, yeah, on Zoom, just because it's way more practical and accessible for people. Because if you think they're literally all over the sort of metropolitan area, there's a good like hour-and-a-half drive between places. So yeah, we have that on Zoom just to make it simple.
And we can also invite the rural groups along as well. So we've got groups who are like 4-hour drive away.
Or 8-hour drive away.
True. Yeah, true.
Do you still get that the conflicting platforms though? Because some people won't use Telegram because it's not secure. So people that like Actions won't talk about Actions on a. They'll use Signal, or people who use Mattermost, or people. Do you get that sort of conflict still?
Not that much, mainly because I don't think a lot of people are aware of that.
Yeah.
Because a lot of these people are so new to this kind of movement that they don't really know about the idea of, you know, having to keep things secure and having to like have these secure platforms and stuff. So we sort of preface it as, oh yeah, it's like even the idea of downloading this new app, Telegram, is kind of spooky to some people. So we have to say it's like WhatsApp, but you know, slightly more secure. And there are, you know, reasons we use Telegram that I think now Signal actually has the features that we decided to go with Telegram for. So, but most people are happy to use Telegram, and then we have the coordinators on Mattermost.
Yeah, we're organising picnics and house parties and talks. So yeah, I guess when we're doing action planning, we do encourage people to use Signal or to choose their own other if they're not comfortable with Telegram or whatever. But for the organisational stuff, it's just catch ups that we're organising, you know.
Paul, you okay with that? In which case we can go to Julie.
Hi, I'm really inspired by what the Australians, you're all the same, right? But no offense to you guys, but what the XR youth are doing, and that it seems to have taken off in a way that it hasn't in Europe, and it hasn't really in the UK. And you know, I'm not a, you know, I don't understand, like Roger, you probably can understand that more, you know, you're a sociologist, but, you know, like that has set the thing on fire, literally, you know, sorry, but it's really inspiring. So what happened here in 2019 went to Australia, or, you know, with Greta and all that. And now it's helping me in a way to be re-inspired by what you guys are doing, because what's happened here in my local community is just kind of gone like, you know, we're just like fucking flat out, and you guys are carrying the torch, and that's inspiring, and it's really useful. Not useful, it's really helpful in that the kids and you guys are still going. And so I feel like we can bounce back to the UK and just go, okay, like Australia's doing this, and we can do this, you know. But what I'm concerned about is the complacency that's happened here to me in the UK, in that we're being told it's all sorted, it's done, you know. I mean, you know, don't get into Boris Johnson and all the kind of bullshit COVID stuff, but, you know, it's like, to motivate the rebels here, it's like, oh, well, you know, it's going to be okay because it's been done. And I know activist groups in the past have like, you know, well, we did the civil rights movement, and they're just like, oh, well, everybody went to Alabama, and, you know, it's all sorted, it's fine. So that's sorted, that's done. And I feel like that's where we're at here. Like, shit, like the people, like just the personal people I'm dealing with, this is anecdotal, is like, oh, well, you know, yeah, we've done our bit and it's done, or we're being told that it's done. And you guys in Australia and places outside the UK are keeping the fire going. I don't know. I don't know what I guess I'm trying to say that complacency is to me a real problem, and I don't know how to deal with it. I don't know what Roger, you've always been like pushing boundaries, and I, thank you for that. But like what next? Because what I'm hearing from people is, oh yeah, we get that. Like climate change, we got it, we're done. Like it's all sorted. So how do you deal with that? Or are you guys not dealing with that in Australia? I mean, I'm not sure, sorry. Australia is a continent, like you're all the same, but in the UK, the feeling I'm getting is everybody's like, oh yeah, well, it's all done. It's done. We get that.
Yeah, do you want to make one or two quick comments, and then we've got to finish and you can contact people directly. But thanks, Julie. Yeah, yeah, a few final words of wisdom from Western Australia.
I'm not sure we have any. It's different everywhere. We are still a petro state, so we're not done, and nobody thinks that really here. Coronavirus, you can't discount how much of an impact it had on everybody's lives and their psyches and their ability to engage in something as external as climate change, climate emergency, global heating, whatever. I'll probably just defer to ask Roger. What do you reckon, Roger? How do we crack people out of their complacency?
I was just going to pass on to you, Ewan. Well, I think what we've learned from this session, or hopefully what we've learned from this session, is we do have the agency within our own resources to build the movement, assuming COVID isn't battering us, right? I think everyone around the world knows when COVID is at its fullest extent, then it's a dead duck, right? No one's got any bright ideas. But what's interesting about Western Australia, of course, is they were, lucky enough not to have COVID that much. And they've shown that it is possible from within your own resources to build 8 or 9 groups in a reasonably sized Western city, right? That's it. They're not making great claims that it works everywhere or anywhere and all the rest of it. But I think that's sufficiently motivating. And I think the key thing that comes out of what they're saying is you have to get out and about, right? This is the single biggest problem of XR groups around the world, is they build a group and then just sit there, right? You have to get out and do the stalls, do the leafleting, do the door knocking, and have a sequence of heading for extinction talks, and make sure those heading for extinction talks are loud, emotional, in your face, and there's a clear pathway to action afterwards. So those are the things, right? And the details are, you can get the details by contacting the Western Australia guys and go and get on a Zoom, right? And find out about those little nuts and bolts things that makes all the difference. The last thing I want to say is we will be holding what I think will be another really amazing session with the guys in Portland about storing and raising money on the street, which is a really underdeveloped mechanism of developing XR around the world. We've got a massive brand recognition. It's not monetized. It needs to be, because as we've seen, that's what develops the teams, which develops the mobilization. So last thing, so check out that. And just to do a little bit of mobilizing in a rather not very good way, if you want to join XR World and help with organizing these events, they're quite exciting, aren't they, finding people all around the world, then get in touch with us. We will be having an open meeting at some point in the next 2 or 3 weeks, I think. And we'll hopefully be able to have these as regular events, and people will be able to just initiate things. There won't be any gatekeeping and all that business. I just want to finish off by thanking the 3 guys so much, not just for doing this, but for doing everything you've done in Western Australia, and to thank everyone on this call. It's really difficult work, isn't it? But it's totally vital. So thank you so much on behalf of the next 10,000 generations and all that. And let's go on with the job. Okay, thanks guys. I'll see you all in a bit.
Thank you. Thanks everyone. Yeah.
Thank you everyone. Take good care.
Thank you. Bye.